So, welcome back to another episode of Planning for Retirement. My name is Scott Nelson, and with me is Elyse Azaris.
Hi,
How are you, Elyse?
doing well.
So, what have we been hearing a lot of concern about lately?
Probably Doge and all of the people that are not going to have jobs. That's kind of something, uncovering a lot in government. I'm trying to stay on
Politically neutral?
the neutral and just talk about kind of some things that have happened and that are happening. And we've seen some clients come in who said, we're retiring this summer.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. It's been kind of fun to free up a lot of extra funds.
Maybe.
We've been talking about what we think that should maybe go toward. And one statistic that was wild to read about was how many people claimed Social Security, and it was more than there were citizens. So,
Yeah.
very eye-opening. A lot is being uncovered, and a lot of funds are becoming available. I know that there's been talk of giving back to citizens on that amount. I do think I have a different opinion on that, but what's your opinion? What are some things that you've heard about that you might want to discuss today?
Well, I think my hope is to encourage everyone to pause, take a deep breath, and let's look at the big picture. So if any of you have ever been to any of the classes we teach or met with us ever, you'll know that one of the big concerns that I have personally is the fiscal trajectory of our country.
Yes.
I mean, with a $36 trillion deficit and counting, which is $3 trillion higher than it was a year ago, just 1 year ago.
It's really hard to comprehend that number.
Oh, and that's a whole nother discussion
hard.
that I'm not prepared to take on today. It is a huge number. But I had a chance a few months ago to meet with former Comptroller General of the United States, David Walker. And he gave a speech at an event I attended. And then I got a chance to visit with him personally afterwards. I have pictures to prove it. And the man's brilliant. He is arguably the most well-versed private citizen on the national financial picture that there is. And his opinion is that unless the government gets things under control, and if you think about it, if we're talking about having a financial gap, there's only two levers that can be pulled, right? We can either cut spending or we can raise revenue, which is to say raise taxes in this case, in order to make those meet. David Walker's not the only one that's talking about this point. There was a white paper released by University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business a year ago that said unless the federal government drastically cuts spending or drastically increases taxes before 2040, anything done after that point will be too little too late. We will
And why is that?
implode as a country. We won't have enough economic strength or revenue generation to change the course. And, if the United States collapses, then so will the rest of the world, because at the moment, as a global economy, we are a consumer economy.
Very
Meaning
much so.
we are, it's no longer an agricultural-based economy at all. It's based on what we as consumers buy, and
That's
that
really
drives it.
what the markets are, right? I mean, it's us. It's what we are spending on what's happening. And in what you were talking about, it sounds like we need to do both. It sounds like we need to cut costs, which is what Doge is doing. We need to cut the cost,
Yeah.
and we need to I still think that taxes are going to go higher.
Yeah,
With that number you threw out, it's hard to comprehend that number, but something has to be done.
well, I heard someone argue that there's not. So Elon Musk claimed from the outset that he could find $2 trillion a year in waste in the government. I'm not sure that there's going to be $2 trillion there to find as waste, but I applaud the efforts of everyone involved in cutting the federal expenditure. So we got to get federal spending reduced to a reasonable level, or we have to increase tax rates. And so in our planning philosophy, we try to have people's tax deferred income strike a proper balance. If possible, we'd like to see all of our clients be in the 0% tax bracket as retirees, because then they're insulated no matter what happens in terms of tax rates. If they're in the zero bracket, 2 times 0 is still 0. So
Or as
no
close
problem.
to.
But if we can get them close, but I mean, second place is going to end up being kind of a distant second. But we still want them to be as efficient as they can be in the event that tax rates are doubled. But, I applaud the effort. Now, we can argue about how everything's
Tactfulness, maybe.
being done. But I'm reminded of that old saying, if you're going to make an omelet, you're going to have to break a few eggs. Yeah. There's going to be disruption. I sincerely empathize with those affected. That said, we also know that there are plenty of people in the workforce today. I mean, in America today, we've got 12,000 plus people retiring every day. And so I have to believe that there's a certain percentage in the federal workforce that could retire. Maybe they're not emotionally, mentally ready, but financially would probably be just fine in retirement, that would be leaving the workforce anyway. I think there are others that maybe don't really love their federal job, but they're in their comfort zone, right? But could go find better suited employment somewhere else and would have a paid period of time to go looking.
I think that would actually be really beneficial for that category of people who may not be super happy in their federal job. They can go find something that they can do really well in and that they can thrive in. And they are getting paid to go search and to go find. There's plenty of jobs 30th. Out there.
So as a citizen and a taxpayer and a financial advisor concerned about other citizens and taxpayers, I'm encouraged by the fact that some actions finally being taken to attempt to reduce the national spending.
Yes.
I would not want to see tax rates double. Who would? Especially if it's you paying them. But something has to be done, so something's being done. For those that are being critical, offer a better idea, right? But I think it has to be meaningful. We've had the elected officials for a long period of time who have just kicked the can down the road. And I get it. Imagine coming back as if you're in Congress. If you're in the House, you're going to campaign every election cycle. So every other year, you're coming back to your constituency. How's it going to play if you get to come back and say, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to cut the fill in the favorite program here to reduce the deficit, and we're going to increase your taxes so that we can close that gap and balance a budget federally." That is a recipe right there to not be reelected. This last election cycle, we're in the state of Utah. The last election cycle I thought was vicious, and we had several incumbents that very well might not have made it on for reelection. It's just that divided, I guess, is a good way to say it. I fancy myself more of a middle of the road guy. I can't believe either side has all the right answers. I think there's probably some middle ground that needs to be touched, but because of the polarization that's taken place with the voters, that doesn't get any traction, because if you're from either side and appear to be cooperating with the other, your base is going to vote you out in the primaries. So it's tough. The system's broken.
Yeah, it is tough being in the political party and being unpopular when you're trying your best to do what's best for the country. It's really hard to balance that. And like Scott said, there should be a middle ground. We just don't see it right now. It's very one way or the other. And we were talking about some of the other cuts that have been made with national parks. And like he mentioned, we're in Utah, so we have a lot of parks here. And I think it's actually really beneficial for each state to kind of maybe take charge of all of those parks. And I think it will be wonderful for Utah. And I think other states as well. It'll be beneficial state level versus the federal. But just having it within the state would be really beneficial, and for the economy too, for the state.
Yeah, I think the farther removed people are from what's happening, the poorer the decisions are about that.
I think we kind of do need to take a step back and view it just numbers. If we look at the math, we look at the numbers, we know that something has to happen. And whether it's a popular opinion or not, I think that we should do what's best to solve those math problems, to take care of our country, to take care of each state, to take care of each other. I really think either side that you're on, I really think that we want what is best for each other. And I think a lot of people just kind of forget that. But it does come down to a math equation, and we got to find money somewhere. And so having all these drastic cuts, it doesn't necessarily eliminate what's provided and what's available. It's just going to be a reconstruction of how that's going to work. So
I mentioned that opportunity to listen to David Walker, and he had, I think, about 8 points. And just off the top of my head, I'm going to miss some, but 2 suggestions that he made that I thought held a lot of merit were that we need 2 constitutional amendments, which means we need to have a convention of states, or we need to have a constitutional convention to get these passed and ratified properly. But the first was an imposition of term limits for Congress, both the Senate and the House. Pick what it is, but there needs to be a limit on terms. There are too many that go back there and they kind of lose sight of really what they're representing, and it leads to an opportunity for corruption. But if they're not there that long, then
I think too, just remembering citizens. When you're in that type of position for a long time, like you said, you lose sight of the goal. You need to get back into being a citizen in everyday life, and then you lose touch.
We need to be more anxiously engaged. The other thing that he mentioned was that there needs to be a constitutional amendment that limits the amount of debt that the country can have to a percentage of gross domestic product. We can all agree, I think, that the debt ceiling is a joke. I share frequently a video I saw about raising the debt ceiling, and they reduced the federal numbers to a household kind of budget kind of numbers, and just it's stupid. So we need to have something that way. We need to be energy independent as a country. In fact, I think we need to be independent in every way possible as a country for national security reasons, if nothing else. He mentioned that we need to find inefficiencies. And at the time, this was just after the election results came in. He was hopeful that Elon Musk could find a lot of waste and inefficiencies that could be trimmed, but he expressed doubt that there would be enough found by itself to right the ship. He said, we always talk about taxing the rich and raising income tax rates, but he said the fact is, using Warren Buffett as an example, Warren Buffett is quoted as saying that my secretary pays more in income taxes than I do. And David Walker suggested that that's probably true because most of the tax Warren Buffett pays are capital gains tax, which is a much lower rate. So he says if you really want to tax the rich, it's not going to be through income tax. We need to do away with all the special exemptions and credits and so on the tax return. Have the tax brackets be realistic and do away with capital gains tax. Have it all be taxed as income tax, whatever type of income it is. And he says in that way, we'll generate more. It won't be onerous, and take care of it in that way. So he has some bright suggestions. I think there's solutions out there to be had. Somehow, though, we need to come together and not be so divided. The soundbite knee-jerk reactions to everything aren't helping anybody. We need to look at the big picture.
Yes, and I think that our society, we live in such a privileged society that a lot of people take social issues instead of looking at our core issues that we have. We're so privileged. That's the word that we do focus a lot on social issues that really just come down the list. They're not even at the top of the list of what we should be focused on.
Critical stuff, for sure.
It really is. And so I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that we can cut some of that wasteful expenditures and hopefully knock out some of that interest on the debt. I know someone said a suggestion was, that all that extra funds that they're finding, we'll pay it back to citizens. But I think it's more important to pay down the interest on the debt for our country, so that we don't just crumble and fall and implode.
Yep. Depending on who you listen to, and there are PhD economists that have written papers and given their opinions, but as a country, we have 10 to 15 years before something really drastic would need to take place to right the ship. So I applaud the efforts to do something now.
Yes.
I know that everyone gets all excited when we challenge status quo, but it has to be.
Yes.
If we keep doing the same thing we're doing, we're going to keep heading towards the cliff, which none of us want to get to.
Well, I hope that this has been a little bit helpful for those maybe that have been stressed ever since election had happened, and now all that DOGE is doing to cut spending, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of hope that we are headed in the right direction, and hopefully we can come together, maybe come a little closer. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think we need to
A little closer.
watch out for somebody else if you're able. And
if there are some questions that you might have, Scott's a professional, and he's professional in retirement planning. And so if you're one of those who may have gotten that notice that you're going to be retiring soon, or may need to find a different employment, or have questions about rolling funds over from different retirement accounts, we'd be happy to help you. And you can look us up on our website at AskScottNelson.com or call us at 435-723-3370. We'd love to chat, get to know you a little bit. So.
Yep. I mean, if a doctor gave you a diagnosis and you were a little concerned about it, you'd want a second opinion probably. we can offer that financially, we would encourage you to call.
Thanks for joining.